So minimalism as a concept has been around for centuries, but it hit peak modern popularity around 2015 or 2016 after the release of the documentary called Minimalism, which was made by this guy and featured this guy and this guy. Personally, I watched the movie and I didn't really enjoy it, if I'm being honest. I found it to be both cringy and boring, but it did serve as my gateway drug into the idea of minimalism, and it inspired me to seek out content that I found to be more my style and more relatable related to minimalism. And apparently I'm not the only one, because it exploded in popularity around that time.
Minimalism.
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 Minimalism was everywhere. YouTube, Instagram, Pinterest, all social media platforms were just full of photos of rooms with perfectly crisp white walls and beautiful mid-century modern furniture and extreme decluttering. And Marie Kondo even got her own Netflix show, which was basically just diet hoarders, if we're being honest, but needless to say, minimalism got very popular very quickly. But in the time since, public opinion has started to shift, and minimalism as a whole has started to wane in popularity. And I think that there's a few reasons for that. For starters, everything is cyclical, especially when it comes to trends. And while I would personally like to believe that minimalism is a lot more than a trend, really it's a philosophy for the way you live your life, and it helps to guide you in the decisions that you're making, for a lot of people, it really was just an interior decor trend or a hashtag, and so easy come, easy go. Additionally, I think that there are a lot of people who are just way too extreme in their approach to minimalism and took things way too far to a point that it just wasn't sustainable long term. A quick YouTube search will result in hundreds of videos about people showing off how they live with less than 100 items, or about how all of their worldly possessions fit into a backpack. Like, congratulations, you only have one pair of socks, you're really cool, I'm sure you smell great. But I think social media largely incentivizes people to take things too far, to do everything just for shock value and just for show, and in effort to try to one-up the person next to them. So naturally, if you're used to living with 50 items or less, there's gonna come a point where you get sick of that and you wanna start to live a more normal life. And then of course, there was that whole situation over the last few years that locked everybody into their homes for months on end. And I think that previous to that point, a lot of people just saw their home as somewhere that they went to sleep and cook the occasional meal. But after that, their homes became their entire lives. It became where you live, where you sleep, where you do everything, where you're stuck 24 hours a day. And I think that for a lot of people, they found themselves feeling really bored and really understimulated. A lot of people found themselves with more time on their hands than they knew what to do with, and more pocket money than they were used to, because you couldn't go away on vacation, you couldn't eat at restaurants, you couldn't go out and shop. And so it gave people the ability to indulge into new hobbies and new interests. Suddenly everybody was learning how to bake sourdough bread, how to mend their own clothing, everybody was redecorating their homes, picking up new musical instruments, getting back into the hobbies they had abandoned when they were younger, and naturally they needed to buy the things that go along with all of that stuff, and I think that's great. Minimalism was never intended to be about self-deprivation. It was never meant to be about making your life more difficult or less comfortable. On the contrary, it was just about giving you the ability to question what it is that brings you joy and what doesn't, so you can eliminate all the things you don't care about to give yourself the ability to focus on the things that you do. Buying new things that actually add joy to your life does not make you any less of a minimalist. Personally, minimalism has had a very profound impact on my life. When it first gained popularity, when I first found out about it back in 2015, 2016, I was like 23 or 24 years old. I was living at home in my mom's house, sleeping in the same room I'd slept in my entire life. I was bouncing back and forth between crappy part-time jobs and trying to start my own thing, but not really succeeding at it. I had really no direction in life, to be honest. My childhood bedroom, where I spent the majority of my time, was full of so much crap that I had accumulated over the duration of my life. CDs and records I didn't listen to anymore, clothing I hadn't worn since high school, music gear that I never really used, silly posters all over the wall, just years and years of accumulated stuff that I was so reluctant to get rid of for no real reason at all. In truth, I didn't even realize it at the time, but I felt absolutely smothered. Part of it was pure laziness on my end that allowed things to get so out of hand, but in another way, I was kind of scared. Growing up without any money meant that I felt tremendous guilt for throwing out or getting rid of anything that was at all usable still. The sunk cost fallacy was very real, and I would look at the clothing that I hadn't worn in 10 years and feel guilty getting rid of it, knowing that there wasn't inherently anything wrong with it, even if it just wasn't my style anymore or wasn't really what I wanted to be wearing. I would look at every item and think about how much money I had spent on it at the time that I acquired it. I would think about how at one point it was something that I really valued and really wanted, and how nothing had really changed objectively, but now my opinion of it was completely different, and I felt bad. The truth is that even though I was a young adult by that point, I was still very much living like I was a teenager, wearing the same clothes I'd been wearing since I was 14, sleeping in the same bed, spending my time doing the same things. And this inability to get rid of things was holding me back as a person. It was holding back my progress and my ability to grow up and to become the person I wanted to be. But when I discovered minimalism, it forced me to stop and ask myself if this is what I really wanted my life to be like. It forced me to ask myself what I really wanted out of my life, what my values were, what was important to me, where I wanted to be in the future. It made me very aware of how much our environment impacts our mindset and the way we feel about ourselves. Every day that I woke up surrounded by clutter in my childhood bedroom and put on another tattered band t-shirt was another day that I chose to be complacent and stagnant. Another day that I chose to be a child living in an adult's body. Another day that I chose to do what I was used to doing rather than what I actually wanted to be doing. Living in such a cluttered space really did clutter my brain. So I started methodically paring down my things. I sold off the vast majority of the stuff that was in that room, and after a few weeks I had a fraction of the belongings I had started with, and I had about $4,000 extra in my pocket, which felt great. But I wanted more. I wanted more empty space, more breathing room, more control over my own life. And that meant less stuff, less clutter, and less time spent doing things I don't want to be doing. I decided I wanted my own place. I mean, I always had even up to that point, but this whole process of decluttering and opening up free space and gaining control of my life was completely addictive, and it made me want even more of it. It made me want more control in an environment that was truly my own. But I realized that in order to get my own place, I would need a more stable income. I'd already been saving money aggressively for a while, but my income was inconsistent to say the least. So I cracked down on my business. I started taking things more seriously. I started working more and earning more and then saving more. Thanks to minimalism, I had realized how little I cared about most material possessions, which allowed me to save even more money. And I went full tunnel vision and just kept working and working, kept my head down, kept saving money. And after a little while, I was able to actually get myself a cute little townhouse. Then after a few years, my townhouse had increased in value and I was able to sell it and use that money as a down payment for this house. And now at 30 years old, I have my own house, I run my own business, I answer to nobody, and I generally live a peaceful life. Now, that's not to say my life is perfect. That's not to say that I'm rich. I'm definitely not. It's not to say that there aren't still things that I'm working on or hoping to achieve. In fact, I'm pretty much always working on something, whether it's something professionally, personally, financially, in my social life, whatever. But I think that I've come a very long way in the last few years. It's actually crazy to think about how much my life has changed in the last 6 years, and I think minimalism played a big role. I'd like to believe that even without it, I would have gotten here eventually, or that if I hadn't found minimalism, I would have found something else, but honestly, I don't know. What I do know is that regardless of whether or not minimalism is still popular or still trendy, it's still an important part of my life, and it still matters. It still makes up the framework for how I approach a lot of the decisions in my life. I regularly ask myself questions like, is this worth my effort? Do I actually care about this? Is this going to improve my life? Is this worth the money? Is this worth the time? Is there a simpler way I can do this? Is this in line with the person that I actually want to be? Basically, minimalism inspired me to ask myself what I wanted out of life and to make a plan to get there. And to me, that's so much more important than crispy white walls or Scandinavian furniture. But a little bit of that doesn't hurt either, I guess. If you're somebody who considers yourself to be a minimalist, or if you've ever taken an interest in minimalism, I would love to hear your perspective on this. Is it still something you actively think about? Is it still something you identify with on a day-to-day basis, or have you found yourself moving in another direction? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this video at all, if you found it at all helpful or interesting or even just entertaining, please go ahead and hit that like button. It really does help out the channel and I really appreciate it. Feel free to subscribe as well if you haven't done so yet. You can follow me on Instagram at according_to_Nicole. I've just created a Patreon page as well where I'll be sharing more kind of casual lifestyle type content. I know a lot of you guys have been requesting content about my grocery shopping hauls or my recipes or meal preps, and I'm happy to share that stuff with you guys. Unfortunately, it doesn't really align with where I want to push this channel, but I will be sharing it on my Patreon. So if you're looking for more casual stuff, more stuff about saving money and food prep and just general life stuff, check out patreon.com/accordingtonicole. The link will be in the description box down below, but other than that, thank you guys so much for watching as always. Take care, and I will see ya next weekend.